Welcome to Art Lounge.
So, what's Art Lounge? It's a space for artists, ones aspiring, or those who enjoy it, to come together and share ideas, thoughts, expression, and creation. So whether you're an illustrator, a writer, a musician, sculptor, comedian, dancer, architect, or someone who enjoys art in general, this space is for you. I'll be streaming daily with a mix of content, and in the near future, I'll be announcing different opportunities for you to participate in. So stick around. Welcome back to the stream, everyone. This is going to be the personal project stream where I'm going to be working on different ideas, whether from imagination or references or just copying from real life or photos. So you guys will be able to see that process here. So let's jump into it. What are you guys looking at right now? This is an idea that I've had for a while, and I'm starting the stream with the sketch already kind of done. If you guys want to see it from the beginning, I'll probably be uploading it to my Patreon sometime in the future. But you guys let me know in the comments what you think, whether you'd want to see it all the way from the beginning or this is good. I just kind of wanted to save everybody the struggle of having to erase and do it all over again. Granted, that is part of the process. But yeah, I guess for the first episode of this stream, I figured it's better to just start with already some sort of an idea for you guys to tune into. So this is something that I've had for a while in my mind. It's a character that I want to include in a comic book that I'm writing and I'm developing. And I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what he's like, what his personality is like. And I guess this would be more of like a pin-up concept design than it is anything else. And interestingly enough, I just figured out, while looking at this, that my influence for this character comes from already a character that was made from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And interestingly enough, this is something that was called Cryptomnesia by Carl Jung. It's this thing that happens where there's influences that you've had in your head, but you're not consciously aware of it, and you think that this idea that you come up with, whatever it is, whether it's writing or anything really, is an original concept or doesn't have any sort of specific roots, but in actuality it's based on something. And in this book called Man and His Symbols, he writes about how Nietzsche actually wrote part of the book in Thus Spoke Zarathustra that mimics exactly a story, a children's story, I believe it was, that is written in the book itself. And Carl Jung actually goes and gets in contact with his sister, and he finds out that that is something that they read when they were younger, that book, because the story was so similar to what was written in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It just couldn't be that it was like not influenced at all. So what they end up figuring out is that this is what really happens, is that we come up with certain ideas, but these ideas essentially have influence from some point in our distant memory and our distant experiences in our lives, and just manifest themselves in different ways. So yeah, when I was doing this character concept, I thought really the influence came from, more so from the movie Fly, The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. And I was like, all right, well, you could take that and just kind of play around with it and see what other ideas you can come up with it. And granted, even if you look at Baxter, he's not exactly the same character. They don't look exactly the same. There are different features on him that aren't on Baxter, but I just found it pretty interesting that I just figured this out after I completed this drawing, that it does actually have a little bit of a resemblance to him in a couple of ways. But it was still a lot of fun to do anyways. It was a lot of fun playing around with his features and trying to come up with his design. So yeah, what you're looking at right now is just like a quick sketch that I like to do just to get myself a skeletal structure to start with. Just play around with different poses, different designs until something kind of sets in. And I recommend doing that a lot, actually, when it comes to drawing. For anybody else who's trying to come up with characters or drawing from imagination, it's best to just sit in and sketch as much as possible until you feel comfortable with some sort of design. And you'll find that most artists, whether professional or intermediate or whatnot, they actually do this as well. It's just kind of it's a warm-up, it's brainstorming, it's ways of brainstorming. Even in writing, people would do various drafts before they commit to anything, and it's the same thing with drawing. You're trying to create a draft for yourself before you really commit to anything, and this is what this is, in a sense. It's a bit of a draft, and you could see it in the light blue pencil. I'm using, if you guys haven't figured it out yet, a iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil on Procreate. And yeah, I like this. I like the setup. I like the Apple Pencil. I didn't think that I actually would like it because of the texture. It's kind of different from a Wacom tablet. The Wacom tablet has a little bit more of a waxy feel, which resembles paper more, even though it still really doesn't. It's kind of far from it, but it's closer than I would say when it comes to the iPad and Apple Pencil. But the process is a little bit different. When you're using a Wacom tablet, you're not looking at the pencil, you're just kind of staring at the screen, and that whole hand-eye coordination is a little bit different. Whereas with an Apple Pencil, it's a lot closer to the experience of actually drawing on paper. You're able to actually see the pencil as you're doing the gestures, and in some ways I think that's a little bit easier. For me, I find that when I'm using the Wacom tablet, and it's probably because I haven't used it long enough, I tend to erase a lot more, and it takes me a little bit longer to create certain lines than it does, for instance, using the Apple Pencil, or way different than when it is on paper. I find that I'm a little bit faster when it comes to doing it on paper, and it's probably just has to do with like how much practice that I've had with any of those mediums. I think it's just interesting how each one of them, even though you're doing the same thing, you're drawing and you're using the same kind of process of like sketching and penciling and then inking, that each one of them has its own kind of process, the unique way of going about it and how it feels and what the results are. Like for Wacom tablet, I use Control-Z like almost all the time, whereas when it comes to with the Apple Pencil, it's a little bit different. I'm just like tapping away any mistakes. It's a little bit quicker, it's a little bit more intuitive. And I think the best experience for me personally, and that's one of the reasons why I was doing the other streams, is doing it traditionally, having to take a break from staring at the screen all the time and dealing with computers and buttons and all that, and just kind of feeling the paper itself and the pencil and how that really feels different. I think especially in modern day where pretty much everything that people do is dealing with computers, it really is such a great break to just turn off all that stuff and just sit down and focus on something that's really there, that's physically there, and you could actually touch all these mediums and feel the mediums. For instance, on a computer they have programs now, and even they have like similar to an Apple Pencil where the tip of it is a brush, yeah, they all kind of emulate the experience, but they still lack something that can't be substituted by actually sitting down and inking with an actual brush and inks and using the pencil and erasing and all that. They all have such a unique experience within themselves that I don't think it's ever going to be substituted by anything that's computer made. And I'm kind of glad for that. I really do enjoy, like I was saying, it's such a relief to be able to just take a break from everything that's computer related and screen related and just kind of tune into a different reality in a sense. You know, you're really zoning into something totally new or totally different. And yeah, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to substitute that in any way. And I kind of want to keep going with those streams where I'm drawing Conan or coloring Conan or inking the comics and stuff traditionally so that I could get better and faster. And then when it comes down to doing more like big time or long time projects or anything or comics in the future, it would be mainly traditional and a lot faster than any other medium, just so that I could maintain that break from computer stuff and notifications and messages and emails and all that. Like, I really get tired of it, so it's good. I'd like to keep that going. But yeah, you know, just going back to this, I think it's still fun to do, especially with its mobility. You know, I could sit down on a couch and actually just draw, and it's just as comfortable than at a desk in some cases. It could be a little bit more so. You know, it's compact, and there's so many things that are in the application itself that make things easier and faster. That it is also a delight to do. I think it's also great when it comes to sketching. You know, there's less paper that you're wasting, and you're coming up with all different ideas, and there's less dedication, I guess, when you're using an iPad Pro or Apple Pencil in Procreate. It's a lot less dedication. You could just clean it out a lot faster. There are layers that you could work with that make it easier for you to be okay with mistakes. Yeah, I think with doing traditional work, with doing it on paper, there is that, I guess, fear that you're going to make the mistake, and you're trying to prevent it, which is good in some ways. It's disciplinary for you to be able to focus more and be a little bit more determined on creating confident lines. But it's excellent to also do the opposite of it, where you don't have the pressure of having to have perfect lines or anything. You could just, you know, it's a canvas, it's a blank canvas. You could do whatever you want, no big deal. You can make all the mistakes you want. You can make it as messy as you want it, and, you know, no real repercussions. You could just tap away the mistake or whatever it is that you didn't like, and it just makes it more of a free-flowing kind of experience. So I do like to use it for sketching a lot, and I find it really helpful. Like, you have to do that if you're working from your imagination. You have to be free with that, with that idea that you're gonna make mistakes. It's not gonna look great, and just wrestling with it and trying different poses and erasing part of the leg and, you know, redrawing it over and over again until you get it right. I think it really definitely is great for that process as well. And I think you also really learn from your mistakes as well. Like, I've noticed that sometimes whenever I would do certain characters or character designs or coming up with certain ideas, within the mistake I would notice a line that I like, and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty good actually, that doesn't look that bad, and then I would just incorporate that into the final touch-up or just define it a little bit more. And I think that should be a sense of relief in a way, knowing that you really could make great mistakes. That is the thing. You could make a line, or you could come up with a certain idea within a mistake and it ends up being something that really resonates with you. And I think also that's kind of the process or the journey to finding your own style as well. You know, if you're open to making mistakes, if you're open to being kind of loose with your lines and trying whatever you can to come up or pinpoint or pin down the idea that you had in your head, you can stumble upon a certain process or certain lines or whatever it is that you incorporate into your style. And there are just so many factors that really go into that, into developing. And that kind of just jumps into the next topic of where do you get the inspiration? Where do you come up with your ideas or, concepts or whatever it is? And I think for a lot of people it's many different things, but I guess I could speak for myself and just from other stuff that I've read about. I think for me personally, I get a lot of the ideas, like you guys heard, from movies. Whether it's certain characters that are there that you could take and you could kind of play around with them, as long as you don't copy it exactly as it is. I think it's fine, as long as you don't copy, if it's like a comic book character, as long as you're not copying the exact idea, the exact features, and trying as much as you can to make it as different as possible. I think that's fine. I don't see any problem with that. You're still using creativity, you're still using your own style to emulate it. So yeah, I think, for me, definitely it is movies. You could draw characters from there, or even just conversations that characters have could spark up an idea or a concept. You just have to be in tune and kind of into it to capture it, or to get your mind flowing with creativity or whatnot. You just have to be kind of committed to it. And I think the other place for me, and I would say most heavily influences ideas, would be books. Like just reading stories, reading whether it's fictional, non-fictional even, philosophy books for sure would do that. They really, for me personally, they get the creativity going like nothing else. Like certain concepts that you're trying to nail or trying to understand, and coming up with different examples in your head in order to understand these concepts, it kind of gets the brain going. It feeds your creativity in some sense, pours some fuel in a fire, and makes you come up with different either answers, different ways of viewing whatever text that you're reading. And I think that's also liberating as well. I think some people get too focused on the true meaning of things, of whether it's, if it's a story that they're reading, or it's philosophical text that they're reading, or meaning in movies. They get a little too caught up with capturing the true essence of it, which is important as well. But it's important not to forget to also have your own interpretation, coming up with ideas from those interpretations as well. And that's the beauty of art, and in general, whether it's movies, whether it's writing, whether it's music, it all kind of influences or affects people differently. And from that experience, they come up with their own reactions or interpretations or conversations or whatever else. That's the real, I think, beauty of art, is the amount of individual interpretation and reaction and impact that all those things can have. Just make it such an important aspect of life. But yeah, just going back into where do you get that inspiration, and it's pretty much all those things. It could be just from hearing certain music, and how it makes you feel in ways that could influence. For instance, if you're a painter, that could influence how you're painting the canvas. And there's actually a famous artist, his name was Kandinsky, where he painted sound. And that's something called synesthesia, when a person is able to see color when there's a certain sound that's playing. So for instance, if it's like a C note, they see like yellow light emanating when that note is played. And it's a really interesting kind of a magical thing that happens to people. Some people would consider that a condition of some sort. I think it's like a superpower more so than anything. It's kind of amazing to be able to see sound, to be able to see it in color, especially. That's so cool. But yeah, his paintings kind of summarize that. He got his influence from listening to certain music and classical music, and then drawing, or painting rather, that piece, that composition, and he would make a portrait out of that. Like that is amazing. That's incredible to me. If you guys haven't seen Kandinsky's work, you should definitely take a look at it. It's interesting to know that there are people out there who have these kind of experiences and visions and ways of seeing things that are so different from everybody else. And it's cool to see their work kind of ingrained into history in a sense. And check out Kandinsky's work. But yeah, she's just an example of how even music can translate into visual art, into hand gestures and paint and such. But yeah, like I'd consider even graffiti also a form of expression. In fact, it's definitely a form of expression. Granted, there's some terrible work out there, like the quick ones that you see on gates and whatnot, and that could be somebody's way of sketching. I don't encourage that. That's not right in some extent. But there are places where they're devoted to just graffiti art, and one of them, unfortunately, that was in New York, got shut down. It was called 5 Points, or the Fun House or whatnot, and it was an entire building that was covered in graffiti, from head to toe, inside and out, all sorts of graffiti dating back to like the 80s. And a lot of like influential artists came from there. Yeah, there were amazing pieces. And I remember a while I used to take the subway, and I would see it from the outside. I would see it passing over the building and seeing incredible amount of work, very creative, very individualistic. That's one of the reasons why I bring it up, is that every single graffiti artist had their own voice, whether it was through the font, through the colors, through the characters, or ways that they were able to create that. It's very creative. Hopefully a lot of them took that and made even more incredible art with it as well, despite it getting shut down. And of course it got shut down and turned into like co-op buildings or whatnot, really ugly buildings too, right by the train tracks. Not to mention, like, who would want to live in one of those really expensive like $2,000 apartments right by the train, where it literally is just like 4 or 5 feet away from the train tracks. So imagine all day, every day, you're just hearing trains going by nonstop. What a nightmare. So yeah, they took down this amazing building that had all this beautiful art, all this like history. Granted, it was like from the 80s up until like the 2000s. I think it was like 2007, 2010. I'm not really sure exactly, but that's when the building got torn down. Yeah, and that's just another example. Even fonts and how they're being expressed are very individualistic and have very creative, interesting process in them as well. But yeah, you could look at all that stuff and come up with different ideas, different things that could really inspire your next piece or inspire a character design or abstract drawing. That's also another thing with like abstract drawing as well. It's like how it's being expressed, the emotions that they're feeling, and the colors that they use in order to do that are all very individualistic as well. But I find that for me personally, yeah, it's definitely books, stories, conversations there, philosophy books, obviously, talking about Carl Jung and Nietzsche. They do get the creativity flowing for me, and that's where I draw inspiration and draw different ideas from as well. So I think just having, if you are pursuing the field, if you are kind of struggling, you're kind of having like an artist block or whatnot, I think all those things can be, I guess, healers, lack of a better word, of the artist block, or to clear the artist block. You could dive into all those things to gain back that creativity. I think, yeah, another great method for illustrators is to draw from nature. A perfect example of this character even is just how the combination of man and fly combine together, and drawing the fly, actually figuring out all the different features and ways to draw it can be your visual library, can help build your visual library in a sense. So next time you sit down and you draw a character, the way you drew some parts of the fly or some parts of the rhino or some parts of the horse or whatnot can contribute towards creating another interesting, fun character. I think also, especially just in terms of being able to I guess practice your hand, making it more flexible, being able to draw certain lines, drawing certain curves. That kind of is another benefit of drawing from nature, drawing from animals, or drawing from buildings and cars and such, and all those things have their own specific form, specific lines, and the more you copy from them, the more flexible your hand becomes, the better your hand-eye coordination becomes. You're able to do certain hand gestures that you weren't flexible enough to do before. I think when people start out drawing, or when they're in a process of developing their drawing skills, they don't realize how stiff their hand is and how their muscle isn't capable yet of doing the things that their eye wants to do. There's that disconnect. Yeah, that's what that whole hand-eye coordination development is. I think it's kind of similar to working out. You can't expect your muscles to be able to handle like 150 pounds just when you start working out. You have to work towards that. You have to gradually, despite you wanting to lift that much for whatever reason, you have to gradually build your strength. You have to gradually build your flexibility in your muscles for it to be able to handle that much load on the entire body, that much stress. And that same thing goes to drawing. You have to develop your hand-eye coordination, your muscles, for them to be able to make these gestures, for them to be able to make these lines, for it to come out looking right. And that's one of the reasons why some people just can't for the life of them draw a circle when they're first starting out. It's just their hand is not trained enough. It doesn't have that memory. It doesn't have that, I guess, the technique down, or any of that stuff down, despite they know what it looks like, how they see it all the time. It's pretty simple to the eye, but it's another thing when it comes to the hand. And granted, if they take their time and they do it slowly, little by little, they'll be able to do it right. But how hard they're pressing, usually that's another mistake that people who are just starting out make, is they press so hard on the paper because they want to make sure they have control over the pencil and that it's going to be right. Every line, every inch that they make is going to be in control by pressing hard on it. And then, whoops, they make a mistake and it's so hard to erase it. And now you have this like ingrained line in the paper. No matter how much you erase it, it's still there. And that's just because they haven't practiced enough, So just drawing as much as you can from real life, drawing as much as you can from all different sources, can vastly improve whatever you end up focusing on. And I noticed that also with people who get fixated on anime. They're like, I want to draw anime style. That's fine, you could do it, but you're not doing yourself a disservice by drawing from real life, by learning to draw from from figures, or despite them not having like an anime style, they have like more of a realistic style. You benefit on so many levels because of the intricate details and different lines and complicated lines as well, that they end up carrying over into whatever it is that you choose to do. Whether you end up drawing animals, you practicing cars could have definite benefits to it as well. In fact, the starting out process can be very similar. Like some people use a box, sketch of a box as the groundwork for a car, and the same thing for, let's say, drawing a horse or drawing a rhino. It's like the same idea. The framework, what the parameters that you give yourself to work within are the same process for it. So by learning to do one thing, it kind of helps you do another, and it makes it look more interesting as well. I remember when I was teaching kids and they were doing drawings, they were so focused on creating the characters that when they did, the characters were very plain. There wasn't much to it. And a lot of it had to do with them just focusing way too much on characters and not enough on drawing other things around to add to the characters, to make the characters look cool. Like when it came to drawing feet, they had no idea. But they were able to draw the face well, or they were able to come up with interesting face features. But when it came down to the shoes, they would either just cut off the feet, they would draw it all the way down to the paper, making sure that the feet aren't present, or one of the most common things that a lot of beginners do is they would hide it. They would try to hide it behind something. So you would see a lot of beginners drawing some character and his hand is behind his back for some reason, and the other one is like in the pocket, but they don't know how to draw pockets properly. So just this, it just comes back around to the idea that draw everything as much as you can. And in fact, there is something relieving about not having to draw in a style, because you're just focused on drawing the object as it is without having to worry about, well, am I doing it with my own style? Am I doing it well with the style? You're kind of that's not important in that process. When you're trying to draw something from life, you're just trying to draw it as it's there. The reference is there for you to work from. So yeah, and even for myself, there are times where when I'm drawing backgrounds, I'm like, what do I draw in a background? What is there for me to put into this? And I kind of blank out on it, and then I'd have to sift through references, looking at photos, looking at other comic book pages, and trying to notice what are the details there that really make up the scene, and I think that sometimes that's overlooked, especially when I don't know, for me, I guess, I won't speak for everybody else, but when I would look at comics, or when I began looking at comics, I would focus so much on the main characters. And I'm just going through my old sketchbook, and I was looking at the stuff that I used to draw, and it was pretty much center page trying to draw a pose, or trying to draw, whatever the character was doing, and not so much the background at all. And eventually I got really well at drawing, really good at drawing the characters, or drawing the face features, or hands and feet and stuff. But then it came down to like drawing the backgrounds, drawing things to fill up the space, to make the scene interesting, to give it some sort of vibe, to give it a mood or some sort. And I kind of couldn't figure that out. And that was a great learning process as well. Some people just continue to go on the path of just drawing characters all the time, and then when you look at their backgrounds are terrible. And that kind of collapses the entire moment of the panel, of the entire image as well. You kind of recognize that, wow, they really haven't practiced drawing any of that stuff. The car looks so wonky, it's out of perspective. It doesn't even make sense in comparison to how well the person is drawn. So don't do the disservice to yourself, just focusing on what looks cool. Sometimes things that aren't that cool end up making everything look great at the end. If you draw it properly, if you draw it well, it complements pretty much everything. And I think the more and more you'll draw, you'll recognize how every bit of detail make the image, make it pop out, or give it even a mood, or give it a certain feeling. I can't tell you how many times I've actually gotten stuck with minute details. Like, I'll have the entire piece ready and it's all pretty much done, but then I'll sit there and I'll play around with like a little face feature, like parts in the corner of the mouth would make the biggest difference to me ever. Just a tiny little bit of a difference in the line when I'm looking at the person's face would make it seem as if though they're like either lost or upset or awkward, those little, and it was such a tiny little thing that kind of made it the biggest difference of the entire image when you're looking at it. And that just brings it up to another thing of like, studying the face expressions. Like, I've noticed people will get really good at drawing all the things. Like, they'll draw the background, they'll draw the figure well, the anatomy's great, it's fantastic, but their faces are blank. So it's like these like superhero poses, really dynamic gestures, but their faces are totally blank. They kind of look like mannequins, like supermodel mannequins. And granted, that does have its benefits depending on the scene or what they're trying to convey, but when that is your default to everything, that's a pitfall. You don't want to have boring face expressions or boring face features. You kind of want to have it to invoke some sort of feeling, right? I mean, that's one of the great reasons we watch movies, or we read books or whatever. We want to go through an experience, and we want to be transported into the scene in some way. So I think that's also brings it back to how important it is to just draw as much as you can from whatever it is that you can, and do it over and over and over again, and try to pay attention to all these little details. And that's that kind of what makes it fun, for you to be able to notice these tiny little things that really do make the biggest impact. There was another drawing that I was working on where I guess it was the ladder, and whether the lines on the ladder were going horizontal or vertical, changed the vibe of the entire scene, or changed the vibe of the panel itself. And I just kind of sat there and played around with it to try to find the right one that fits it. And it was great, you know. I ended up making, even though it was such a small detail, it really did pay off in my perspective. Like, I personally enjoyed it at the end, and I thought, oh, that looks great. Despite it not being incredibly complex, despite it not having, you know, ultra realistic imagery or whatnot, it still created great composition. And I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at. The composition of things in general really do make a difference. It shouldn't just be about how one thing is cool. Like, I think one of the best pieces of work is when everything is kind of connected with each other. It's connected to everything that's in the image, as opposed to just standing alone and just like, yeah, let me just do this and that so that I can move on to the next panel, or I could move on to the next project or whatnot. It kind of, it's not a good approach. Sometimes, you know, for me also, you just blank out. You don't know what else to do, and that's fine. That happens. But I guess I try to put in as much as time and effort as I can into a piece, and having all these things in mind, which brings up something that I talked about in previous streams as well. Excuse me. I'm just gonna take a drink of water. Yeah, it just brings up another topic that I discussed before, which is how important it is to have a pad, not just a drawing pad, but just like a writing pad as well. I think the best results you'll get is when you combine both of them. You sit and you write down all these things, like, I have to keep in mind the composition, I have to pay attention to little details, I have to pay attention to face expressions, to backgrounds, to perspective. And having that written down is probably one of the best things that I've done for myself when it comes to drawing, or just in general. Like, you know, having to wake up every day and then have to recollect everything. Like, what was it that I was talking about? What was it that was really important when it comes to drawing? And then spending all your time and then being like, oh yeah, that was it. And then forgetting other things that were really important. And then by the end, you would be like, oh, it's this. That's important. And then the next day, waking up and having to recollect all the things that you've learned from the previous 2 days, you know, that becomes a little bit too much, I would say. Granted, that would at some point be like a ingrained thing in your mind. You don't even have to think about it anymore. But I think it's still fun. I think it's still fun to just open up the book and be like, oh, this is what I've done yesterday. And in some ways, it makes you feel good about how much you've learned. You remind yourself, like, wow, I really put in time and effort, and I actually remember all these things, or I recognize all these things. And it becomes a no-brainer almost. You're like, how did I not know that? But if it wasn't for you writing it down, you probably wouldn't have remembered it. You know, there's so many other things that are swimming in our minds from day to day, from things that we have to do to other people and responsibilities and so on. You know, all that stuff, plus this, it's a lot. So I think it just really makes things so much easier on multiple levels, whether it's chores or whether it's personal hobbies, or even just, you know, reflecting on your day. It's great to have a writing pad. And I think that's for pretty much any artist, whether it's like a musician, whether you're obviously for a writer, that goes without saying. But for illustrators, you know, musicians, illustrators, dancers, pretty much anybody, and it's great to have that and just write all this stuff down so that you don't have to wrestle with it and try to remember the next day. Right? Yeah. I think I'm gonna pretty much end it here for this stream. This is the first stream, so there's been a lot that I covered and I talked about, but I'm going to be talking about this stuff over and over, different examples or different ways, or so don't worry about it if you guys haven't grasped all of it. It's really more of just getting the creativity going. But yeah, I'm gonna end it here. And if you guys like this content, subscribe, you'll get notification. And stick around, there's going to be another stream where I will be doing coloring. And it's going to be traditional. I'm going to be doing traditional coloring using a brush pen, maybe some inking as well. Really depends on how it all turns out. But yeah, stick around. I'll be back for the next half of the stream. Thanks for tuning in, guys.